Yoakum. You are coming into this sequel, and the first film is like I said earlier, it's so visually rich. This is such a memorable looking film visually. Can you talk about coming into that in the second movie, and what was your vision for expanding on that? Because I feel like somehow the world really did get bigger in this film.
Yeah, and it's also always like a fine line also in regards to, what to keep from this beloved universe, because you do want to keep a lot of that also, and what's important to the fans. And at the same time, for me as a filmmaker, it's important to make something original and take, Maleficent to the next level and kind of like make Maleficent 2.0. But I do think that a lot of I feel a huge part of the success of the first film was that it had such a strong emotional core. And I think that was the most important thing for me, to continue telling that story, the story about Maleficent Aurora. And that's definitely also something that I can relate to as a parent myself.
And Ed, I was thinking that you've been in some really visually amazing films, but can you talk about joining this crew and some of the physical demands and how you got into character? Because you make a huge impression by the time you put on war paint. I was like, yes. Did I make it weird? I hope I made it a little weird.
Thank you. I mean, there were so many layers to the preparation for this. Obviously, before I met anybody from the cast and the crew, I create the character in isolation, analyzing the script and doing the kind of intellectual side of it. That's one side of things. Then once I came in and we started to go through the process of prosthetics, the first makeup test I did was 10.5 hours. We got it down to about 4.5 hours by the end, but, going through that every morning, that process of putting on the cheekbones, the ears, the skin, and, the claws, finishing with the contact lenses. You've gone through a complete physical transformation, and you're so kind of physically informed by that process, and then you come out and you're standing opposite these incredible actors, such as these guys. So it's like, there's so much process to get to the point where we're all just standing on set having a great old time.
Can you talk about working with Angelina again, and especially kind of in the same neighborhood of character as far as like a strong, nuanced female goes?
Yeah, I mean, we had a great time making Salt all those years ago, and so it was really exciting to get a chance to do stuff. Obviously it's completely different, but but you're right. It's these very dynamic, very interesting characters. They have a really interesting relationship in this film, and so and some of that is sort of unsaid as well, and just sort of felt in the sense of connection, and so all of that was really rich, and so it was great to do that. Yeah.
Michelle, I wanted to ask you, Maleficent is a fairy tale, but yet it feels very modern, and it feels very of the moment. And I wonder if you can talk about coming into this story that features, 3 women who are very different in their power, and just I think the writing really stands out as to how different all these women are.
So, yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things about this film is, yes, it is a fairy tale, but at the same time, it isn't it's a very unusual fairy tale. It's what I loved also about the first film. It was so surprising, and it, it just didn't, what I loved is that it kind of played in this gray area, and it talked about, good versus evil, and in that we all of us have a little bit of everything in us, and I think in terms of strength and how that manifests itself, and it's differently in everyone. And one of the things we loved about, for instance, Aurora's character is that, in many ways, she is ultimately the strongest and the wisest of all of us. I mean, my character is really brilliant and diabolical, but I wouldn't consider her terribly wise. So I do think it's interesting the way, and I like the way it plays out.
Elle, speaking of which, I was thinking about how in the first movie your character is blessed with happiness. And yet in this movie she runs into a lot of really dark situations. But do you feel that that personality trait that she has affects how you play the character and affects her experience?
Yes, I mean, obviously, in the original fairy tale, she's, granted with these gifts when she's a baby. And I think Aurora, she symbolizes the good and the kindness in the world and the acceptance. And obviously that was really shown in the first film because she's much, much younger and much more innocent. And her kind of embodying this this really overwhelming love of life and want, and she lives in between both worlds. She's a human, but she is queen of the Moors and is grown up amongst the Moor folk, and so she lives harmoniously with both sides. So she doesn't understand why the world can't do that. But she's, in the second film, what's so great is that she's definitely a young woman now, and she's grown up. She is stronger. She has much more conviction in herself, and she's learning how to gain her independence. And I love the family theme in the movie because it's very realistic to real life of growing up and kind of separating from leaving the nest and also making your own choices in life. I mean, she's obviously is disapproving of Prince Philip, but we know that love wins, and Aurora stands up to Maleficent, which was such a very, very strong moment in the film too. I think it might be shocking for fans to see that because Aurora's taking charge of her own life. So, but with kindness, which is the most powerful of all. We didn't want Aurora to then be a lot of films they put her in armor and have a sword and she's fighting and like that makes her strong, and that's not Aurora's true nature, and that isn't necessarily true. I love that she symbolizes that for also young girls. Like I was that girl, and I was always soft and wanted to be a mom and wanted to get married and very feminine, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so we get to show the strength in accepting your femininity, and Aurora does it in a pink dress.
Angelina, what does this movie say about family to you?